What's up everyone, Tire Kickers here, and in today's video I'm showing you how to replace the clutch in a BMW E39 540. I'll give you all of the tricks, tools, and torque values you need to know to get this job done, so make sure you stick around and smash the like button if this video helps you. I'll also drop some timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead if you need to. Let's get to it. Starting with the exhaust, use a 13mm socket to remove the 4 bolts and 1 nut that secure the metal support bracket. At this point, make sure you have something to support the exhaust so it doesn't come crashing down. If you're doing this in your garage, a floor jack supporting the rear muffler is a good place to start. Moving rearward toward the differential, remove the 2 13mm nuts securing the exhaust hanger. I used a wrench, but there's enough room for a socket if you prefer to go that route. Once you've freed that bracket, follow the exhaust to the rear of the car and remove the 13mm nut securing the last exhaust hanger. Now moving back toward the front of the car, start working on the oxygen sensors that are held in place by a plastic cover and 2 10mm nuts. Go ahead and pull them apart while you're at it. Now the only things left to remove are the 4 13mm nuts that secure the exhaust to the engine headers. With the exhaust freed, carefully route it out from under the car. The rear muffler is heavy and awkward to carry, so be aware of that. Now we're going to turn our attention to removing the heat shields. Grab an 8mm socket to remove the center shield, the small shield right in front of the diff, and the 2 shields located next to the headers. Next up on the list is removing the drive shaft. Starting at the differential, use a 16mm wrench to remove the 6 nuts that secure the CV joint to the differential flange. Moving back towards the front of the car, locate the flex disc at the rear of the transmission. There are 3 21mm bolts with 21mm nuts that you need to remove. You can mark the drive shaft with a paint pen if you want, but this is not necessary. The bolt should be on there pretty snug, so if you're doing this alone, try to wedge the 21mm wrench against something rigid and consider using leg power if you have the car in your garage. Now, using the 13mm socket, remove the 2 nuts securing the center support bearing so you can remove the drive shaft. This is where the real fun begins. The picture on the right is the backside of the engine with the clutch, flywheel, and rear main seal removed. I've marked the location of the 12 6-point Torx bolts that secure the transmission to the engine. You need an E12 socket to remove these bolts, and I provided a link to a $10 set from Harbor Freight in the description below. Make sure you have the rest of the tooling list handy, but most important are the transmission jack, a lot of extensions, and the swivel joint. Go ahead and make a diagram of the bolt locations out of cardboard so you can track where each bolt came from. Some of them are different sizes and you don't want to unintentionally mix them up. The 5 bolts that I marked in green are going to be the easiest, so knock those out with the E12 socket on an extension to get your ratchet or breaker bar clear of the bell housing. Next we're working on the 2 red bolts on the left. Both of these bolts have a 16mm nut on the back side, so grab a 16mm wrench and wedge it onto the nuts as best you can. Also, the top bolt will most likely require the swivel joint, so make sure you have that handy as well. You're definitely going to need the swivel joint on the next 3 bolts I've marked in green. The 2 bolts on the right hand side mount the starter in place. To gain access to the final 2 bolts at the top of the transmission, you have to remove the 6 13mm nuts and bolts that secure the transmission support bracket, but make sure you have the transmission jack in place as you remove these bolts. Lower the transmission down slightly, then route the E12 socket on a couple feet of extensions from the rear of the transmission to the 2 bolts I marked in orange. This is probably the most challenging part of the job, so be patient. With the 12 mounting bolts extracted, we now need to prepare the transmission for removal. Starting on the driver's side, unclip the oxygen sensor and remove the 2 13mm bolts securing the slave cylinder. Disconnect this electrical plug, then swing around to the top of the transmission to remove this locking pin. Pry upward on the tab with your finger or a screwdriver to release the clamp, then slide the pin out. This is what the pin looks like when it is removed. With the pin removed, slide down to the passenger side of the transmission to disconnect another electrical plug and unclip the remaining oxygen sensor. There's one last retaining clip to slide off the end of the pin connected to the base of the shifter. Once that's done, you're ready to remove the transmission. Wiggle the transmission clear of the pressure plate, then slowly lower it down and out of the way. Make sure you keep an eye on the wires as you lower the transmission so you don't get hung up and break something. With the transmission out of the way, we can now work on the clutch and pressure plate. There are 6 6mm hex head bolts that mount the pressure plate to the flywheel, and I've circled their locations on the right. If you're removing the flywheel as well, it's critical that you have the correct T60 Torx bit. A regular T60 bit won't work. You need a tool with a long shaft that tapers in the middle section so it fits in the hole. That's what she said. FCP Euro sells the specialized bit for about $32, or you can do what we did and modify a T60 bit you can get from the store for about $25 less. Totally your call, but if you don't have the right tool, you're gonna be dead in the water. The 6 T60 Torx bolts are located around the center of the flywheel. You're going to need your special Torx bit, a breaker bar, and some way to keep the flywheel from spinning. Similar to the Torx bit situation, you can buy a special tool to lock the flywheel, but those tools typically run over $50. My suggestion is to improvise like we did by using leverage against the ring gear to keep the flywheel from spinning. I've also read that people have used rubber between the flywheel and the block, similar to a doorstop, to achieve the same results. Like the Torx bit, there are several options and it's up to you to choose what makes the most sense for your situation. Wow, so we've put in a ton of work up to this point and it's time to subscribe and reassemble. I'm not going to walk you through reassembly step by step, but I will give you some of the things that you need to be aware of, starting with the torque values. Feel free to screenshot or jot this information down. It's critical that everything is safely tightened as you put the car back together. With the flywheel already installed, I showed you how to mount the new clutch discs using the centering tool provided in the Luke clutch kit I ordered from FCP Euro. It's really important to note that if you're planning on reusing your pressure plate, you're going to need a tool to unlock it. I recommend doing a quick Google search to find some information on this, but since my kit came with a new pressure plate, it's a direct plug and play. The kit also came with a grease pack, so I smeared that on the splines that the throwout bearing interacts with. I went ahead and tossed the new throwout bearing in the transmission as well. With the flywheel and pressure plate torqued down, you can maneuver the transmission back into place. Start threading some of the easy access bolts, then work on the top 2 bolts while you have the rear of the transmission lowered. Before you bolt up the transmission support brace, make sure you have the shifter pins reinstalled and the wires are properly routed over the top so they don't get pinched. Moving to the drive shaft, it's super important that you order a new gasket for the rear diff flange. I'll have a link in the description to the gasket that I used. The nuts that secure the CV joint to the differential don't have a specified torque value, so try to get them as tight as you can with the 16mm wrench. Reassembling the heat shields and exhaust is simply the reverse of what I showed at the beginning of the video. Overall, this is a challenging and time-consuming project, but it's not impossible as long as you smash the like button and have the space and tools to get this done. I bought the Luke clutch kit from FCP Euro for about $260, which came with everything I needed. Don't forget about the CV joint gasket, which I also picked up from FCP Euro. I did not replace my flywheel, so I recommend shopping around to find the best option for your budget. To wrap things up, here's a mostly comprehensive tooling list to get this done. I left off simple things like ratchets, impact drives, jack stands, and other stuff like that. I really hope this video helped you, and as always, if you have a question, make sure you drop it in the comments section below. Thanks for watching, and best of luck with your repair.